Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. Thank you for being here. We have two great guests, Pete Hegseth and Brent Bozell, later in the program. I always tell you I'm very blessed to be in this position, to have this platform. But even more, I'm blessed to have you as an audience. Why? You're patriotic, you're smart, you're attentive, and you want to learn, and you want to know because you want to help save this country, and I'm with you 100%. On last evening's program, I talked a bit about democracy. Well, we're going to call this Democracy Part 2, and we're going to dig even deeper. So I'm glad you're with us. Ever hear of this group called Freedom House? They're sort of left of center, but it's a pretty good organization that keeps track of fascism, Marxism, authoritarianism. That is, regimes that are repressive and oppressive. And they put out this report in 2017, their latest report, talking about what's happening throughout the world, and they're very concerned about it. And the report focuses mainly on communist China and fascistic Russia, but addresses other countries as well. And so their concern is that we're seeing democracies more and more that are turning into authoritarian regimes. Now, let's talk about this. This is important. And I want to relate this to the United States. As I go through this, you think about this too, and what's happening in your country, our country. They talk about repression in the modern authoritarian state and the strategy of the modern authoritarians within democracies. Repression, they say, is more subtle and calibrated. Exploitation, looking for opportunities to advance the cause of authoritarianism in a relatively free society. Crippling your political opposition without annihilating it. So you at least create the impression that you still have an opposition, but you cripple it. So it's not an effective opposition. The capturing of societal institutions, academia, entertainment, so forth and so on. Dominate all branches of government. So you still have these branches of government, so you can still refer to separation of powers and branches of government and so forth and so on, but control them. Sound familiar? Electoral systems that give the illusion of democracy, but the elections are fundamentally unfair, and you create a crude majoritarianism. Who's been warning us about that? I think his name is Donald Trump. Dominate the media, because the media and the party need to be essentially the same. An oligarchical control of the media, we have that today. Use high production, use entertaining content, but still the government/party, or what I'll call the state and the monopoly party, control the media. Control of the security forces, control of the key elements of the economy, rewriting the history of the country to serve the purposes of the party, the purposes of the agenda, because the party is more important than the country. The party is the causal that you use to destroy or conquer the party. Plow through institutional checks and balances in the name of democracy and political mandates. We're doing it for the people. We were elected. Define all repressive acts as democratic in order to legalize repression. Maintain control over the electoral process, behind the scenes, false diversity and inclusion. Maintain control of the political process, the electoral process, but talk about the diverse population, how many people are voting. It's a fantastic democracy when it's not. Create the illusion of competitive elections while squelching it in reality. You need a government party. We have a government party. It's called the Democrat Party. That's why it keeps building the bureaucracy. That's why the bureaucracy is in full legislative mode when the Democrats control it. They use regulation, they use executive orders, they use the executive branch to bypass Congress. That's why they'll shut down the government before they'll cut one penny for the massive administrative state, because the government, the Democrat Party, the administrative state, and the media are effectively one. Brings us to the government media. We have a government media. We have a party media. Look at all the Democrats that populate all the media platforms. Look at all the corporations that are Democrat-supporting corporations that own the media platforms. There's simply no question about it. This massive administrative state serves the purposes of the Democrat Party. It is permanent. It is freedom-killing. It is a leviathan. It is a ubiquitous force with immense police powers. The government is to be a neutral entity when you have a democracy, but not in authoritarianism. Increasing authoritarian state. It tolerates the plurality of parties as long as it is the dominant party. As long as the government functions for the one party. The government and the party are indissoluble. They collude to do things like restrict free speech, to rewrite our language, pronouns, what's a woman, to impose beliefs and thought processes, CRT, DEI, ESG, you name it. Rewrite the language, change the meaning of words, impose new belief systems, thought control, constantly, day in and day out, in the government-run schools, in their media, in their culture. Shame people who don't go along, dismiss them, accuse them of being things that they're not. We call this propaganda and brainwashing. And ultimately, fundamentally, the goal is to re-engineer society and the individual to acquiesce to the demands of the party and the state. You see this all around you, America. But they didn't write this Freedom House for America. They were talking about Russia and China and other regimes. I'm talking about America. Big government, more spending, more bureaucrats, IRS agents, rule by regulation, rule by executive order, not the representatives of the people, more audits, more investigations, more penalties, more fines, price controls, wage controls, government-run health care, eliminate the private sector, nationalize drug companies by snatching their patents, a wealth tax, which is an ownership tax on private property, confiscatory increases on taxes for successful people, demonize them as rich, crippling taxes on American industry, call them corporate taxes, government control of education, government control of the upbringing of your children. In Minnesota, throughout this country, parental rights are under attack. Control what your children read in public schools and elsewhere. And when you object and say, take that filth off the shelf, you're accused of book burning and book banning. The destruction of the nuclear family, all kinds of sex acts and sexual perversion and reassignment and all the rest is an attack on the nuclear family and the social bonds. Reshape the family, reshape the population. All this re-engineering and rejiggering is intended to empower the government and the party, the government and the Democrat Party. Mass amnesty. They've already told us what that means, to reshape the electorate. Mass voter registration. Eliminate voter ID, early voting, late voting, voter harvesting, drop boxes. That's not democracy. That's mobocracy. Again, that's not democracy. That's mobocracy. It's happening right now. A propaganda war against the founding. 1619 replaces 1776. The war on the Constitution. The war on the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment. The Second. The Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, Ninth, and Tenth. The 14th Amendment. Separation of powers. Eliminate the Electoral College to empower the Democrat Party in the big cities. Pack the court with leftists, and if you can't pack it, change the court. Eliminate the filibuster so you don't slow down this juggernaut of Democrat Party big government legislation that you can never reverse. Destroy them. But then claim you're defending them. Oh, excuse us, we're defending democracy. We're defending law. We're defending the Constitution. Which brings us directly to the Democrat Party convention last week. What was it? What was that convention? It was a farce. It was a farce of a democratic process. Glitzy, highly produced, star-studded. The media was slobbering all over. Media analysis, wall-to-wall coverage, music, all the rest, dancing was an abomination of authoritarianism on full display. That's what it was. It was a Potemkin convention, a fake, fraudulent convention, celebrating the successful palace coup by Kamala Harris, the vice president, against Joe Biden, the president. That's what it was. It wasn't Obama. It wasn't Pelosi. It was Harris. She overthrew the president. She did it. They create the pretense of a Democratic primary that had all the markings of a fascist disenfranchisement of millions of voters. They toppled the party's democratically elected nominee for a buffoonish, incompetent, inexperienced, extremist ideologue who would never and could never receive the presidential nomination through a legitimate process, not one damn vote. That's the way dictatorships, Marxist regimes, military juntas, monarchies, Islamist states, that's the way they operate. This is a first for the United States of America. It's happening right in front of your eyes. The media have been covering it. They've been covering it like a pillow, suffocating it, so you can't really understand what's taking place. But we're told by the party and its media, the Democrat Party and its media, that it was historic, that it was joyful, that it was exciting, that it was spectacular. The first black woman nominee for president ever. Of course, the vice president had already been selected by the party apparatchiks in something called a virtual nomination. We've never seen anything like this. Many days before last week's convention. And without a single vote from any citizen, without any challengers, without any debate, nothing. Zero. That's a coup. She was selected. She led the coup. She organized it. She was selected. And the convention was nothing more than this Potemkin village. It was a fake. It wasn't a political convention. A complete fabrication. A propaganda operation with the full support of the government/Democrat Party media. And then as now, no serious interview for this candidate. No serious press events, even with their party press. No access, nothing. In over a month. Just in-kind media, hundreds of millions in contributions from the phony press. The Democrat Party oligarchs donating billions of dollars to create a fiction, to create an image of our great new historic leader with paid TV ads, party surrogates spread out from Capitol Hill, from different organizations, from within the media, telling us what to think, what Kamala Harris really believes. No, she's not flip-flopping. Massive propaganda, brainwashing operation, like in authoritarian regimes. Oh, she'll eventually deign us and honor us with an interview, maybe a couple debates. Oh, yes, she'll show a little ankle here and there, but nothing that might reveal her grand plans, her past record, her incoherence, her babblings, her anger. Remember that? Curses out staff all the time, uses the F word. But now she smiles and laughs and she's joyful. A complete fiction, a recreated image. That's all it is. They're not going to give us anything that might pierce this fictional veil carefully created by the party and its media to protect her from us. We the people. You see, we're the unwashed. We're the plebes. We just got to go along with it. Just go vote and vote for her. This is democracy, according to the Democrat Party and its media. This is what they seek to defend in their election. We're defending democracy, they say. The real danger to democracy, they tell us over and over again, is the other party, the Republican Party, not Donald Trump. Remember, he's Hitler. He wants to be a dictator. Just remember, he hates the Constitution. Just remember, January 6th. That is the party, the Republican Party that actually held primaries, the party that honored the results of the primaries, the decision of the voters, the party that had a real convention and a real nominating process, the party that nominated for president a real candidate who actually campaigned throughout the country, who was ubiquitous, who did interviews, press events with friend and foe alike, who doesn't conceal his views, his policies, and his plans. A candidate who campaigns everywhere and anywhere, who speaks for 60 to 90 minutes. Oh, he talks too long, they say. Who's demanding more debates, not less. He's the man who's opposed to democracy? That would be Donald Trump and the Republican Party. You see, Donald Trump and the Republican Party, they not only defend democracy, they practice it. I'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.